Hello, welcome back to Wine Wednesday here at French Grocery. I'm Kevin Lance, and today we're talking about Bordeaux, which we've not done before, except for just pointing out the occasional recommended bottle here and there. But this is going to be a very simple primer on Bordeaux, because this is a fairly complicated region. There's a lot of variables. I think we could say that about every place in France, but this is quite a lot different than what we've talked a lot about before, like Burgundy and Rhone, Champagne, Loire Valley. A lot of these places, they're based much more on terroir, the French idea of terroir, and that the wine should reflect the place that it comes from, and therefore we're going to describe that on the label of the bottle. The bottle is actually going to tell you this geographic place that it comes from. We have that to an extent in Bordeaux, but it can get a little bit murky. In Bordeaux, it's much more about the commercial legacy, which is different than maybe the monastic legacy from the church that other wine regions in France had. So you're always going to see a chateau, a doggone beautiful house on the label, because that's what it's about. That's the center of marketing and their brand. We can debate that all day long about how relevant that is, but it's the way they do things in Bordeaux. But I can show you a few things to kind of help guide you along. There are named regions like Médoc and No-Médoc. These are on the left bank of Bordeaux. There's a river that runs through this region. There's a big sort of maritime influence of shipping and trade, but also the effect that that has on the terroir. There's a lot of drained parts of this area that's filled with gravel, and as you near the river, that's where a lot of the best wine comes from. Gravel drains faster, gravel warms faster in the spring as well than clay soil upland. So there are a lot of terroir differences and variables, but it's just been more difficult for me over the years to get my head around it. But there's a classification system in the Médoc. You've probably heard about this. The Grand Cru classification system of 1855. Yeah, it goes back to the 19th century, and very, very little has changed, if any at all, except for one big major exception. But here we have a third, fourth, fifth growth wine. So these were chateaus that were around in 1855. They got scooped up in this classification system, and they're still around today. They may have different ownership. There's a big English influence here. There's much more of a global influence here on the people that own these estates and make these wines than you might see anywhere else in France. So for some that might be less charming, but it's also made this a very commercially accessible kind of place. I mean, any of us can go to Bordeaux and we can get appointments in a lot of these chateaus. They're built around entertaining and showing off, and it's a beautiful part of the country. I spent a couple days here at Chateau Castorade in the Médoc. This predates pretty much all of these chateaus, I believe. I mean, they go way, way back to the local medieval village, and they even have this beautiful little chapel. This is their second wine. That I think these were like 15th century places. So enormous amount of history around here. But some other things that we can point out, we have other regions like Saint-Emilion and Pomerol. If we look at a map, we'll see these on the right bank of the river. And why this is important is that Merlot ripens more reliably than Cabernet Sauvignon. And these are two of the three main grapes. There are other grapes that we can use, but 90% of the wine is going to be red, and most of that wine is going to be made from Merlot, Cabernet Franc, and Cabernet Sauvignon. And on the south side of the river, which is the left bank, that's where we see more Cabernet Sauvignon. It's a little bit more structured. It does make a lot of it's behind the great wines of the Médoc. However, it doesn't do as well on the right bank. It's where we see more Merlot and Cabernet Franc there. But villages like Saint-Emilion and Pomerol can still make really world-class wines. One of the most famous and expensive wines, Chateau Petrus, is from this region, and it's not even in the 1855 classification system because they were all centric on the left bank. So not everything revolves around that. It's a region that can make extraordinary wine from one end to the other. We also make a lot of bulk wine, a lot of very affordable things that you can have any day of the week. Our proximity here in Arizona to California, it's easy for us to get ripe Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon that drinks pretty well young. It's not always the case here. These wines often need a lot of age. And the more expensive stuff is usually expensive because it does do well young. It is from great gravelly soils, and it arrives more quickly. So a lot of variables, not a lot of white wine made in this region, but here's a couple of my favorites. Chateau Carbonneau from Graves, and then a more prestigious region within Graves, Pessac-Léognan. And this is one of the great white dry wines of the region, one of the few. They don't make a lot there. And then a Sauterne, which is a late harvest wine. Has to come from a specific region, this Appalachian Sauterne, but what we have here is Botrytis sets in, and that's the noble rot. So this is a mold that grows in between all the little grapes in the cluster, and if you can capture this before damage sets into the grapes, what you get is a very, very concentrated late harvest juice that will give you a very sweet wine that you can still ferment to high alcohol. This, as a matter of fact, is 14% alcohol, which is pretty high for as sweet as it is. Usually see it in small quantities, but we've got them in 750s as well, and even in magnums, which is a little silly because these pack a big punch. You wouldn't want to drink a lot of it because it's really a mouthful, but they're extraordinary wines. Anyway, my, I guess, point to all this is it's a beautiful region that I've personally overlooked for a long time. I've always just kind of given it a second thought because we have such great Cabernet and Merlot in California. But a trip to this region and a trip to these beautiful chateaus and going in these barrel runs and seeing the process, it's different than what I'm used to seeing in the Rhone Valley and in Burgundy, but it still definitely has its place, and these are still some really fantastic wines with great ageability and a real sense of some deep, dark tones that balance really nicely with a lot of the oak regime that they have, more heavily oak wines, great big barrel rooms. It's a big production kind of place, but they have the capacity for that and still make terrific wine. So that's Bordeaux in a tiny, tiny little nutshell. We can go on and on about it. Maybe we'll have a part 2 and part 3 even of this, and I can talk about some more specific wines and why they're important within the larger context. But for today, yeah, we're a place that's got 3rd, 4th, 5th. I've even got first growth stuff, and then Cru Bourgeois and all kinds of things at $16 and $14, $13. So yeah, for Bordeaux for every occasion here at French Grocery. Thanks for tuning in again, and be in touch. I sent out a newsletter recently. It's not too late. You can go sign up for it. We'll be posting that online. Keep in touch with us for our wine news and events. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next week.